In the last few years, McLaren Automotive has launched a lot of different types of supercars for different types of buyers. This one, the 570 GT, is, as its name suggests, a more grand touring-oriented model. It's got a little more storage space and it's a little more comfortable, designed for buyers who might want to take long road trips or maybe even drive it every single day. But that doesn't mean the 570 GT is any less thrilling than other McLarens, which is why I'm going to stop standing here talking about it and go for a drive in it. And boy, is it fun to drive. But first, let's talk a little bit about what this car actually is. So this is the 570 GT. It builds on the 570S Coupe, but with a different body style that gives me more storage area behind the seats under that hinged glass, well, a hatchback. Now, it's not an enormous amount of space, but coupled with the storage area in the frunk ahead of me, that means you could carry enough stuff to go on a long weekend getaway. With that type of use in mind, the 570 GT is actually a little bit softer than the S. The suspension, steering, and tires are all a little bit less aggressive because, again, the car is pitched as maybe being more for an everyday use or longer journeys. However, this particular 570 GT has a new sport package that reverses all those changes. That means I have the same suspension, same steering, same tires as in the regular 570S Coupe. So I get the more practical body style without sacrificing any performance. That's my kind of car. And what performance there is. Behind me, a twin-turbo 3.8 litre V8, 562 horsepower and 443 pound-feet of torque. That allows me to get to 60 in 3.3 seconds and go on to a top speed of 204 miles per hour. So sure, it's fast, but what I like about this car is that it's exciting to go fast. This isn't one of those turbo engines that gives you all of the torque straight away and then feels flat right up to redline. This is an engine that builds and screams as you build out the revs. It makes it much more engaging to work to go fast, especially when you work these wonderful carbon fiber paddle shifters for the 7-speed dual clutch transmission. And driver involvement and feedback is a big part of what I like so much about the 570 GT. Take the steering, for instance. It's right now quick and precise, yet it also gives me tons of information about what's going on. I can get a sense of what the road surface is like, of which wheel went over a bump. And you know, because I sit so far forward in the car, pretty close to the front wheels, it really feels like the whole car pivots right around you. And when I dive into those bends, the grip levels from this car are phenomenal. That sport package I mentioned means this car is wearing Pirelli P0 Corsa tires, and they're absolutely glued to the pavement. If you get this car unstuck on public roads, well, you were doing something pretty stupid. And carbon ceramic brakes bring me down to a halt time and time again. What I like even more than their performance, though, is the brake pedal feel. There's this initial bit of a dead zone when you first get into the pedal, which is great so you don't plant your nose on the windshield every time you brake. And then it ramps up in firmness very aggressively, so you can modulate how much braking you get really easily with just the twitch of your toe. When you switch this suspension dial into sport or track modes, the 570 GT feels just as agile and precise as the 570S Coupe, going exactly where I point it and changing direction in a split second. And yet, when I switch it back to normal, it's surprisingly civilized over everyday roads. Now yes, it's very firm and you will feel every bump in the road, but it's certainly a lot better than, say, the back-braking ride you might get in a Nissan GTR. And not only does it drive well, but, well, look at it. The 570 GT has this really aggressive and imposing look on the outside. And yet at the same time, because all the aerodynamic bits are integrated into the bodywork rather than with big wings stuck on the back, it actually looks pretty sleek from the outside. The interior is all purposeful with the snug bucket seats, the big digital tachometer in front of me, and carbon fiber everywhere. And it's also very nicely trimmed with stitched leather and suede, with these really lovely speaker grills, and with switchgear that has this wonderful click-click mechanical action to it. And you get a really nice light, airy sensation thanks to this glass roof panel above your head. If I had one complaint about this car, it's the sound of the engine. Now don't get me wrong, it's loud, and you can hear what it's doing and hear the turbo spool up and everything. it's just not the most exciting or pleasing tone I've ever heard. When I think about the glorious noises you get from an Audi R8 or a naturally aspirated Porsche, well, the McLaren's V8 just leaves me a little bit cold. Although clearly that's not doing anything to discourage me from driving this thing all day long. Now, you may not be surprised to find out that a carbon fiber mid-engine supercar is pretty expensive. This 570 GT has an as-tested price of $236,000. That's including $31,000 worth of options. Is it worth that much? Well, I don't know. It is a stupendously good car. Every McLaren I've ever driven has blown me away in terms of its driving performance, and this 570 GT is no exception. Yet I'm also impressed with how little it beats you up in the real world. Between the relative suspension compliance and the extra storage room, this really is much more usable than some other rival supercars. So if you're in the extremely fortunate position of shopping for a thrilling supercar that you can actually drive every day, well, the 570 GT might be just what you're looking for.